point. When I began teaching in a long time ago, and there's the next slide. Come and join us. Okay. You're saying, oh, how could you have done? You must have been a child prodigy. No, of course you're not. No, but you probably spotted, you know, that I am pretty old now, and slight nuance to my accent. Still got a vague East End accent. It was good to listen to Phil Beadle. I can understand him. But because I had a few problems, have any of you taken 11 plus? All right. Did you pass 11 plus?
Yes.
All right. Well, I went to a school in Hainault, and I was the person who passed 11 plus. At the time, I didn't know why. Nobody knew why. So I got sent to, and I do mean sent to, a school in Romford. That my brother was, mentioned this earlier on, my brother was the conductor at the bus garage in Romford, and he said, we've got one of those posh schools here, Keith. That's where you can go. So that's where I went. And basically, I just never coped with it at all. Just never coped at all, because it was a totally different school. So it meant, when I finally got through the school, and my PE teacher, as I was saying about mentor, the PE teachers, because I was good at PE, they looked after me and helped me and kept me going. And when I actually finally left and went off and did a degree in chemistry, my mate said to me, well, come here, Carnegie, you're not going to make a professional footballer now, Keith, you're far too slow. So I went there, and my PE teacher contacted me and said, Keith, would you like to come back here and teach here? Brilliant. And I was better. I thought, well, that's better than working. No, seriously, once I'd started teaching, I thought it was brilliant. And that's how I went back to that school. So immediately, I thought, right, there must be loads of other kids who, like me, don't fit into this. That's what I'm going to focus upon. And here I am, 45 years later, still trying to do the same things. So crucially, for me, this is a very quick synopsis of 40 years, okay, and it's a minute fraction of stuff which I can send to you, provide for you, or whatever. The first thing that I needed to do, I taught PE as my main subject. I did maths as my second subject when I was at Carnegie, but my science teacher, head of science, he liked me as well. He said, please, Keith, we were short of maths and science teachers, begged me to teach science as well, so I started doing both. Notice how little things have changed. And the first thing I tried to do was to use that environment to research and discover. Now, put your hand up if you've come across this before. I'm going to make a bold claim here because I've seen evidence over the last 30 odd years that once you've established this, you will think to yourself, how did I not know this before? Because quite simply, those 5 learning requirements are the requirements for any learning that you may wish to do. Now, I reckon I could not have stumbled or discovered this if I'd not been teaching PE or a practical subject. You can apply this. You don't need to take your notes if you don't want to, because all this will be online, but you're quite welcome to. But basically, once I'd started by 78 to get this in my head, I then started to experiment incredibly. When my children were born in the early 80s, if they were both here, they'd say, yes, they're in their 30s now, they've got children themselves, they were guinea pigs for us. You can see, however, whatever you want to learn, and I show videos of people trying to learn to drive, to any sort of activity, it will always, and I'm prepared to say that, and I'm not comfortable with those words, that you will see that underpins it. Once you've done that, then you can start, and when I used to start coaching teachers in the late 80s and early 90s, that would be what I would do. Walk in the room and look at this room here. You're here because you want to be here. You're already motivated. I can see you're concentrating. If I was observing this, I'd be studying you, not looking at the teacher. And then I'd say, well, what the environment? You know, lovely environment, the room there, sit there, not distractions and things like that. And I will try to give you little tasks to keep you going. Okay. And every time you've done that, the thing they talk about now is feedback. In PE, you can't learn anything without feedback. It's no good, you know, me standing there at the first tee and shutting my eyes, hitting the ball and thinking, is that a good shot? Because if you can't see that, you won't know. Now, it seems obvious. It really becomes obvious when the feedback and the immediacy of the feedback and the effectiveness and the quality of the feedback They suddenly introduced a term. I discovered the term in '98, assessment for learning, and I went and saw Dylan William up in the King's College, had a chat with him. I said, thank you for that. I've got a name now for what I've been doing for the last 30 years or so. Because basically that's all it is. Now, this means that you can apply this to almost anything. So this came many years later, but if I was sitting there and observing a person or whatever it might be, I would be able to say to them, you know, this is why you're struggling. It's because of such and such. It's because your motivation isn't there, or your concentration is weak, or the environment's not conducive. The ones I used to say was, can you imagine trying to learn to ride a bike on a steep slope, cold, windy day, you know, where there's a rough ground? You'd be stupid. You're never going to have a chance at that. You've got to make sure. So when I taught my daughter to drive in a month, basically, first thing we went on the field. I said, you don't need to worry about that. Flat field, took me ages to find it. And we went on the flat field, had to ask permission to go in there. And basically, from there on in, we just applied that. She sat there and I did it in small chunks and we just moved it there, the little things. And within that month, she was able to drive comfortably. She then had to have 5 goes to pass the test, but that's a different thing, as you will see in a moment. But that you will find, I can assure you, that once you grasp that, as a teacher, as a parent, as a person, you will think, how did I not know this before? And goodness knows how many people I've shared that with and had that feedback time and time again. My disappointment is that more people don't use it. That meant, for me, I needed to have if you like, an outlet. Now, my predicament in the 70s, I know it's a lot different then, but in the 70s, exam achievement was the most important thing in my school. He says with his tongue stuck firmly in his cheek. As an ex-PE teacher, I thought how can people put so much value on exams? But I became head of science by that. I was head of department of science by the end of the 80s. I had no choice because the kids, the parents, not so much my head teacher perhaps, but other people put an emphasis on exams. So for me, being the scientist, right, what's the next thing we've got to assess, what we've got to measure, what causes people to be successful in exams? Any of you seen that before? Again, if you teach anything which involves them sitting down writing exams, that will make a massive difference to you and to your students. I was saying earlier on, I was lucky enough to teach sixth formers A-level chemistry. I'll talk several other A-levels later on, but they're a brilliant cohort because you can experiment with them. You try things with them, you have a discussion, and basically you get feedback. So they learn, a little bit. I learned a tremendous amount, and they were major in all of this because I took these kids for 3, 4, 5 years and thought, these are really good kids. They're rubbish at exams. And if you've ever taken, any of you taken A-level chemistry? It's a brilliant subject. Exams are a nightmare because the whole idea is to trick you into doing the wrong things and it tests and assesses the wrong sort of things. So basically, when you realise the problem is that the assessment is different from what you're actually worried about. So the majority of people in secondary schools were English teachers, maths teachers, geography teachers and things like that. Now, I didn't have that restriction. I ain't bothered about any particular subject. Chemistry is great, but I teach loads of biology, loads of maths, loads of physics, all other subjects. So consequently for me, and I was married to an English, my first wife was an English teacher, so I spent ages, and all my mates were different teachers, and I would just gather this. So I used to have, when I moved from the north, hundreds and hundreds of exam papers. And I had folders and folders, exam analysis, and breaking it down as to what they were. So consequently, you will discover, and it doesn't really matter what exam it is. By definition, it has to focus on. So if you're not good at those 6 things, basically you ain't going to be any good at exams. And that's a crucial part. So what I then needed to do was to give this feedback. So what I provided for the kids from about 80, 81 onwards was this. We started off with 9 in the A-level group, and then we coned it down and we ended up with 5, and then I started experimenting with the lower kids and you know, the younger kids and so forth. And in the end, we come down, brilliant. Listen, and those in the brackets there, because what I used to do, quite simply, was you'd come in and say, okay, we're having a quiz today, never exam, never a test. Quiz today, sit down there, okay, right, you've got 5 minutes, 10 minutes to do this, bang, you're off. Okay, and they would do that. Okay, at the end of that, okay, we're going to mark it. Now, you're going to swap over the papers, all right? Person next to you, or it might be the other side of the room, just swap them round. This is the marking scheme, and we would mark them. So within 20 minutes, they've done the exam, marked the exam, and then given back, right. And then we would do the analysis. Okay, so the first question was, we were talking earlier on when Phil mentioned about artefact. I thought, well, blimey, if that had been in my exam, I wouldn't know, I couldn't have answered the question. He said, which artefact? So blah, blah. I was lost then. I thought, I'm stuffed now. Artefact. I thought, I think he must mean. It wouldn't have mattered how good I was at English. It didn't matter whether I didn't understand the perishing word. So if I'm sat there in an exam, I can't understand the word, finished. And I used to walk around, because being a PE teacher, as you've seen in the Euros, I'm sure you're all watching it avidly, and the rugby, which is even better, how many points are scored in the last 5-10 minutes? Because their concentration goes, it's not this, they're not, it's up there, they start to lose it, and they make mistakes. Watch them in exams. You know, I used to sit there and stare at them, and I would volunteer to in days when we invigilate. And I'd say, I'd come and say, I bet he's good at exams. They say, how can you tell? Because he concentrated the whole way through. You know, she'd be rubbish. I bet she's done that really bad. Well, how do you know? Well, after 5 minutes, she was looking around, seeing if, you know, it was all over. And that's the problem. People don't appreciate that the nature of the assessment is primarily the problem, irrespective of what you're trying to analyse and what you're trying to examine. And that's why the words, and I learned this, so when we say, oh, I thought it meant that, I didn't know. That's why most people think in exams, it's not knowing the information. Oh, if only it was that simple, because I've got a lovely technique for learning things. It's rarely that. They actually find that these two are the things that stuff them. Or, in an exam, which frequently happens, particularly at higher levels, they want the technical words. You put down in maths, you know, you suddenly say to, well, that, you know, it goes with something. If you don't use the word correlation, the marking scheme says correlation. Well, why did I get the mark? Because you didn't use the word correlation. Yeah, but what I said to her, I don't give a monkeys. The marking scheme, because I've worked for umpteen different examples, you don't have the word correlation, you ain't having the mark. So they have to learn those words. So you have to do those things. And that's the annoying thing. And that's why I've done session 50 to 100 times called Super Learning for Exam Success. And when I'm talking obviously to the parents and things like that, I always show that, because I then say to them, right, and of course you've been practicing this at home, so when the kids come home, okay, this is how they're going to be assessed. They sit in complete and utter silence on their own, crouched on a hard chair, like this, and they do that for at least an hour, don't they? And you can imagine the response. I said, well, no wonder they're rubbish at it. I said, you know, that's the way they're assessed. If they don't practice something, you know, it's the Ericsson stuff, you know, they're now called 10,000 hours. You know, I was banging on about that in the mid-90s. But basically, if you don't practice something, you ain't going to be any good at it. So if the kids don't practice stuff like that, they ain't going to be any good at it. And it's a sadness, you know, that, you know, they may be they're great at maths, yeah, I know, but if you've seen them in exams, they are hopeless. And that's why, you know, this is a crucial thing, because to bear in mind that when we are trying to get people to do well in exams, this environment is terrible. I mean, just imagine for the moment, if I was sat next to Pip, I'd be sitting there thinking, oh, Pip's gorgeous, you know, what's he going on about? And I'd be so, you know, apprehensive, particularly as a kid, you know, I couldn't even talk to girls. It wouldn't have mattered what was going on. That's not the environment for me to do well in exams. I can't possibly be able to do that. You've got to be understanding of the fact. That's why exams, say driving tests, you've got to then give them the test.